Occupational hygiene, that is workplace health and safety, has some of his history rooted in mining exposures. Not because miners worked in some pretty adverse environments, where they could be in the presence of toxic or even explosive substances with limited ventilation. And once upon a time, they used to bring canaries down with them into the mine as an indicator of hazardous atmospheres. So if the bird fell ill, or worse, the miners took that as a cue to evacuate the mine. Now, workplace health and safety in mining has improved dramatically, but it still doesn't mean that mining is much less hazardous than it was before. And in my project, I looked at silica exposure and diesel exposure, silica released from the drilling and blasting of granite rock, and diesel particulate released from emissions of underground vehicles. I took 102 samples out of the 12 working job groups of miners. And what I found was that the miners were at about 50% of the limit of regulatory standards for diesel particulate. And for silica, it was between 50 to 90% of the exposure limit. And that sounds like pretty good news. It sounded like none of the job groups were overexposed to in terms of looking at these regulatory standards. But the standards also doesn't say anything about additive effects, which is a combination of diesel and silica that could result in a more severe outcome than either substance acting on its own. And considering that silica and diesel are both carcinogens and that they affect a similar area in the lung, this might be something that we want to explore. So I derived a new exposure limit, and then I reanalyzed data and found that now 6 out of the 12 job groups could be overexposed, with an additional 2 job groups being very close to the new exposure limit. And that's the caveat of regulatory standards, whether you're in the US, in the UK, or in Canada, is that they're very substance specific, and they might not take into account additive effects or even give you clear indication about when you should consider them. And so it's up to occupational health and safety professionals to take conservative measures of monitoring and of exposure assessments. Chronic illnesses such as cancer and respiratory diseases do have latency periods, so they don't occur overnight, which means we shouldn't be misled with a false sense of security. After all, in occupational hygiene, we aim for prevention, and we definitely don't want to treat our workers like canaries. Thank you.